we're back at 6:43. Have you ever wondered what happens to your shucked oyster shells at a restaurant? Usually they would be tossed out in the trash with the other table scraps, but conservation groups are turning that trash into treasure.
Our Zach Lajway explains how Galveston Bay Foundation's oyster shell recycling program is helping local restaurants save our bay.
Its water is a mix between salt and fresh. It's unusually shallow for its size.
Ooh, the water is low today.
And it's home to a variety of life, including oysters. Just beneath the surface, important work to restore oyster beds in Galveston Bay is underway.
Oysters are born into the water as just little microscopic larvae. So after about 2 weeks of life, they start to gain weight as they feed and then descend into the water column, and they go in search of something hard to attach to.
Haley Leha, Galveston Bay Foundation's Habitat Restoration Manager, explains oysters prefer to cement to other shells or oysters because they are reef-building organisms.
Sometimes those baby oysters will grow about 1 inch in 3 months. And just to give you some context, legal size here for commercial harvesting is 3 inches.
From served to shucked. Shannon Badd is Habitat Restoration Coordinator with GBF. Each week, Badd collects oyster shells from 26 restaurants throughout the greater Houston area.
Conservation and sustainability is very important to me and to our organization.
At the end of the day, when I've gone to all of our restaurants for that day, I take it to what we call our curing site, and that's where we dump the shell out onto the ground, and it will sit there for at least 6 months to get rid of all the contaminants on the shell.
There are millions of oyster shells at this curing site. That's about 1 acre.
So we're at our Red Bluff curing site. We separate it out into different piles so we know what's fresh shell and still needs to be cured or cleaned. And that shell then sits in a pile until it reaches about 18 inches. At that time, that pile is essentially stopped, and we move on to the next one to start a fresh pile.
Are you seeing success? Is your work paying off?
Definitely. We're seeing lots of success, particularly down in the West Bay part of the system. That's where it stayed a bit saltier, even with all the freshwater events coming through with Hurricane Harvey and those previous years of flooding. Northern parts of the bay are still suffering quite a bit. So the reason we started all this is because there is a loss of this habitat. Hurricane Ike and other subsequent storms have brought in so much sediment, it literally covered up those reefs.
This is one of 5 sites where oyster restoration takes place. We are in Dickinson Bay. This effort is approximately 2.5 acres.
I'll put him back in his new home.
Once clean and cured, oyster shells are brought back to the bay, where they build and restore oyster beds to strengthen oyster populations and reduce coastal erosion. Since the program began in 2011, Galveston Bay Foundation has collected more than 1,300 tons of oyster shell. GBF volunteers have helped recruit more than 49,000 baby oysters through its program.
Wow. You brought a little demonstration. We were talking. Can you just show us what you got here and why you brought it?
So these are shucked, clean. They might not smell clean, but they are clean oyster shells. And so we wanted to show you, this is an oyster shell, obviously, right here. This, if you can see, is a new oyster spawning. So that's why it's critical for these to go back into the bay, because this is what the baby oysters spawn off of.
Wow.
They cement to and then continue to grow.
So literally, if we just throw them out, we're throwing out new oysters,
Right.
essentially,
Right.
even though they're interesting. How do we know if a restaurant's participating? Shout out to Good Company. We love everybody over there.
They are. It's a great restaurant. You start with having a conversation. Go into the restaurant you go to, talk with a waitress, waiter,
Right.
maybe speak with a manager to see what they do with their shells.
Okay.
You can also go to our website, clicktohouston.com. There we have a link to GBF's website.
It's fascinating.
It is. It's pretty cool.
So cool.
Things you
I had no idea about the old shells, too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Zach Lajway. Thanks for enlightening us.
I'll leave with the smell too.
Yeah, take them to Anthony. Anthony,
You've got more sensitive nose than I do.